Were you destined to be a lawyer?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
It was, I probably became a lawyer because I couldn't find a job doing anything else that I liked. I actually, after I got through college, I went back. I was working with my dad in business in Mayville, and we were at that was in 1966, and we started to we were building what's now the captain's table, and so that was a big project in a small town, Mayville, and we didn't have any money, and everybody had to do everything from, you'd be tending bar in the winter and run back and cook the meal and take it out. But anyways, during that period, there were a number of lawyers that would come in. That one was George Rogers from Mayville, who was our first public defender, and they would come. And Leetown Adams was a friend of George's, and gradually they were talking. They kept telling me that I should get out of here and try to go to law school, and so eventually that's what I did. But I first had to find out that I didn't like the restaurant business, and I certainly didn't want to do that the rest of my life. So I couldn't find a job doing anything else, so that seemed to be the course of least resistance. So they kind of talked me into applying, and I went to Syracuse, and I ended up eventually back here in Jamestown with Phil, and which was Phil Erickson, which was a real big break for me, really. When I started law school, I was married. I had a child at that time, and then my second son was Paul, was born, who's now a lawyer with us, when I was at Syracuse, and my wife was pregnant for our third child my senior year, and so that made things interesting, and we didn't want to. I was fortunate. I did fairly well in law school. I was on law review, and I had some decent job offers at that time, which I think back of I think I had an offer for $12,000, I think, which was a good amount of money in 1960, or would have been 1972, 1971. But I had worked for Phil during the summer, and I really, because I had my family and everything, we wanted to come back to Jamestown area, and he offered me the opportunity to come in with him, and I said yes. I had no idea what I was even going to make. I never even asked him, what and came back, and it worked out fine.
Now, at the time, was it Erickson and Erickson? Was Phil started with his dad, right?
It started with his dad, and his dad had just died a year or two earlier. Alton, right? And he had a guy by the name of Dick Reed, so it was Erickson and Reed when I came back.
Okay.
And Dick was, so it was the three of us, and so it worked out good. And then Dick finally, he was there a couple years, and then he went back into the Navy. He was, and he actually stayed in the Navy, and for the next 30 years, I believe. So it worked out good. We were in the We were in the Wellman building. Spoto was right down the hall from us. Jeff Weezy was in there. Mark Conley, Al Olson, Bob Booty. Oh God.
Was Sam Conti there then?
Sam Conti, right? Yeah. And
Bruce? Was Carpenter there?
Bruce Carpenter was there. In fact, Bruce actually took over our office when we moved over to the Furniture Mart building.
Okay.
So when we moved out, Bruce took over our office in the. I'm not sure what they called that building at that time, but
Yeah.
it's on Cherry Street. And so I was actually, when I started, the young lawyers here, really there was Dalton Burgett, Dick Slater, Doug Spoto. I'm not sure if Beckstrom was, I think Beckstrom was here at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark Hampton, I think, came a year later or so, right around that time, along with Bill Evans.
Mm-hmm.
Bill was older than I was, but he, I don't think it was, when I started it was Price and Miller, and I don't think Bill was with the firm at that time.
Okay.
And it was just Wright, and they were in the they were all in the same building together too, with Tubi Scarpino and Howard Crosley and I don't know, I can't remember who else was in that building, but
Al Ford was it?
I'm not sure if Al Ford was in that building or
Might have been with you.
what's that?
Might have been in the Wellman building with Stan.
It could have been, yes, yeah.
Ford and Lindy.
Right, and Stan was practicing at that time, and Joe Gerasi and Lucian were together up on 4th Street.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, everyone used to get to Bill Cass and Lynn Hartley were in the same building with us, and everybody seemed to get together for lunch down at Gandy's. Guess it was Gandy's, right?
Yeah, I remember that.
And Ross and Stan, of course, Ross and Stan Weeks, Dan Isaacson. Dan was on the same floor as we were. I'm not sure if Art Bailey, he eventually came into the Furniture Mart building, but I can't tell you when that was. But we had, there weren't, I said that was really the group of young lawyers that were, it wasn't until several years later they started coming with your group. And so
when you look at that composite in front of you, it's a 1967 composite, and you mentioned many names. You're like an encyclopedia here, Paul. But are there a vignette, a story or two you'd say, Greg, let me tell you about such and such, or here's an incident I had with so and so? Because I find fascinating that you guys are a connection to a time which maybe some of us aren't.
Well, I just looking through here, but obviously I had dealings with most everybody here. Right at the top, Bill Harrison was as I said, worked with George Rogers in the public defender's office. I think George started the public defender's office, and then Bill took it over. I think I might have had the last jury trial with Bill Harrison. We had I think it was a contract action, but Bill was. He wasn't. He was struggling a little bit, during the trial, and but what a competitor, and a really a fine a fine lawyer, and looking back, I was glad that I had the opportunity to really actually try a jury trial with him. Bill Blood, of course, he defended. He had a number of insurance companies, and I had a number of cases with him, over the years. Mark Conley here was kind of interesting. Mark represented the town of Poland when I started, and right at that time, the town had a snowplow got stuck on the Erie-Lackawanna Railroad tracks, and the town ended up getting sued by the Erie-Lackawanna, and they were insured by Transamerica Insurance Company. Mm-hmm. And the town only had $100,000 worth of coverage, and Mark called me and asked me to take over the litigation and the defense on behalf of the town, because he was having a difficult time with Transamerica. And Steve Kelly was an attorney in Buffalo. His father was a Supreme Court justice also, but Steve was a represented the Erie-Lackawanna Railroad, and a very astute lawyer, an impressive guy. But anyway, Steve indicated that he would settle the claim with the town within their policy limits, and the Transamerica wouldn't pay the claim, and there was damages, and I can't recall exactly, but they were in excess of half a million, at that time, which was again a lot of money. And but anyways, the long and the short of it was that we finally they Erie went into bankruptcy. Then the trustee wouldn't settle for within the policy. They wanted more money, and we settled the claim, I think, for around a little under $200,000, and the town kicked in an additional $93,000. Mm-hmm. So I sued Transamerica Insurance Company in bad faith. Well, I bring it up because it was one of the first bad faith cases, and there hadn't really been a standard set for bad faith. Mm-hmm. And it was especially a problem with the fact that we settled the claim. So the insurance company said, "Well, you voluntarily settled, so we don't know. We complied with the policy. We're not going to pay." And anyways, we ended up we tried the case, and we went to the appellate division, back and forth. Anyways, we were successful. The court said that we could recover, so we were able to recover against Transamerica. Mm-hmm. I think it was, as I said, one of the original bad faith cases against an insurance company. Bill Cass, back at that time too, I think it was one, Art Sherwood, he was with your firm, right? And we had, Bill just got on the bench at that time, mm-hmm. and got into an argument with Marine Midland Bank. These are, I'm going on, these are just looking at the pictures, but they're older cases. But Marine Midland involved the Kettle estate, Art Kelly, or Kettle, I'm not Kettle, and he owned a lot of TRW stock, mm-hmm. and the bank was concerned with the fact of diversification, and the will specifically, the trust agreement specifically provided that they wanted the trustee and the executor to retain the TRW stock. It would have been good to him over the years, and they didn't want it sold, even though that it constituted a larger portion of the portfolio than a trustee should be required to, keep. Mm-hmm. And the bank said no. We're going to sell it, and they're. Geez, I can see I can remember what he looked like, the trust officer of at Marine Midland. Maybe you...
Fran Grove?
Fran Grove,
Fran Grove,
right.
yeah.
So Fran, I think, was a little on the hook about it. I think maybe he agreed with me that they should retain it. But they turned around and sold it, and they put it into one of their bond funds. And the stock market turned around. TRW went up, bonds went down. They ended up losing a significant amount of money. I sued them for breach of trust and also in bad faith. And fortunately, Judge Cass ruled in my favor, and he surcharged the bank, made him go back into the market and buy back that TRW stock at a higher price, and awarded me significant attorney's fees, which was good at that time. I certainly served it, but it did go up it went up on appeal, and it was sustained. He was affirmed in that regard, but Art Sherwood represented the bank, and somehow Tubby Scarpino was involved with it too, with the bank. I'm not sure exactly how, but and going across. I mean, Howard Crosley was, just an excellent litigator and had a number of, cases and stuff with him. Dalton had the Sawyer murder case, and which was but he asked me to help him with that, so I did. Was involved with the suppression hearings with Dalton in connection with that case, and Sawyer was an interesting. Certainly an interesting individual. Looking, and Travis Travis was, I used to eat lunch with Travis, and which was, Travis was an interesting individual if you knew him or...
Knew of him, but and I knew you guys gathered together at Gandy's, you had your table.
Right, and but he was a brilliant lawyer too. Very, he went to Harvard and very astute with. But for some reason, I got along well with him. In fact, I'm not sure if his wife Margie worked at the Post Journal and written some books, and I'm sure for Margie, she said that I might be Travis's only friend. But he was
what did he do? What was his practice?
Estate. He had a number of estates that he did, and he actually ended up making a lot of money. Really, he invested his money well, and I was going to say, of course, Joe Gerasi and Lucian were in practice at that time. Joe was Gerasi before one of the earlier cases I had. He had appointed as it was an annulment case. I was brought to annul a marriage. A guy they hadn't lived together for a number of years, and I represented the wife, and they didn't get divorced because of their religion. So they were both Catholics, but they wanted to annul the marriage. He had developed some mental health problems that he didn't disclose before the marriage, and shortly after the marriage, I think he was a schizophrenic, and he ended up in Gowanda, I think, for a good portion of the marriage. Anyway, so we brought the action to him annulled, and they appointed Joe as the guardian, and Joe, being thorough as he always was on certain things, we had actually had a hearing as to whether the guy the marriage should be annulled, and I can only remember that I was cringing because he kept asking questions. I thought, oh God, he's going to blow this.
Yeah, he's the guardian.
He's a guardian, and but it worked out. It worked out. Worked out fine. Like, John. I think John and Goodell and Andy. I'm not sure when Andy started practice, but John was, he was he was involved with litigation. And I think one of the earlier cases too was a case entitled "Through on Gravel,"
Mm-hmm.
which it was a case in Leetown Adams had just gone on the bench, and they wanted to mine gravel and in the town of Carroll. It was against the zoning ordinance at that time, and Leetown decided against me. And so we said that, I remember in his one of his decisions that he said that, well, minerals don't have minds of their own, so therefore, you can't regulate where they're going to go. And one of Lee's, famous quotes. But anyways, that case, it ended up going to the Court of Appeals, and it was a case that, just an ordinary case that I didn't think was going to amount to much, but actually turned into, at that time, the court ruling that the environmental conservation law didn't preempt zoning, so that a town could enact zoning to specify where gravel pits were going to go. And on the way up, I didn't. As it went to the appellate division, and then I think the appellate division reversed Adams, but I'm not sure. But when it got to the Court of Appeals, we were successful in the Court of Appeals, and the court ruled that the environmental conservation law did not preempt local zoning, that towns and municipalities could regulate where gravel pits were going to be located. But it was I was just taken back by by the unions and people, how much money was involved with gravel. Mm. And the people that, there was a couple professors from Albany Law School that intervened, wrote briefs in connection with it. As people were saying, I probably could have made a couple $1 million to just dropping the charges at that time, because they were doing all the road work and stuff for the thruway and expansions in the New York City area, and they wanted these gravel pits near, regardless. They didn't want the towns, So that turned into a lot bigger case than I ever thought it would.
Right.
I had some fun cases with. Out of the. I mean, if you want me to digress with, thinking back with people here in Jamestown, with we had Jeff Thompson. I don't know if you remember Jeff, but he was one of the first. I think he was the first black police officer that they hired. And the police chief had a real rough time with Jeff over the years, and they charged him a number of times with different things. Actually, believe it or not, he had about 78 different civil service charges against him at times, which I was successful on. Getting him out of every single one of them, except for one, which involved a situation where Jeff was actually off on leave, and they had a kid cleaning the police locker room, and the kid broke into Jeff's locker and took his service revolver. And the service revolver was recovered off the kid over in one of the movie theaters. So they arrested the kid for, instead of charging the kid with stealing the gun, they charged Jeff with obstruction of justice for allowing his gun to be taken. And that was mixed up with maybe 15 other civil service charges or so forth. But anyways, they got, Judge Cass reversed that one charge, so I did have a 100% record. But then they also, which was kind of funny, I don't know if it was funny or not, but we had a jury trial, and Lee Town Adams was a judge. They charged him with Jeff with, I can't remember the exact charge, but they must have been felonies. And some of them involved the use of marijuana in the police station. And it was one of their top informants was a guy named Donald DeLong, who was he was a crazy kid. He was in and out of Gowanda. Mm-hmm. And I had Donald, I decided I would try to talk to him. And even though every time I went to talk to one of the, and other attorneys, I'm sure like Slater and so forth that did criminal work at that time, I said Tony Caprino was in the DA's office at that time, and he was their top investigator. Anytime I started to interview witnesses, they would call my office and threaten to have me arrested for obstructing justice and interviewing, trying to, so it was always a tense, environment, really. And but I got Donald over, and he came into my office, and I decided that I was going to tape him with a. And so I started talking to him about what was going on. You could tell he's whacked, and I asked him about bringing marijuana into the police station. I said, I suppose you brought marijuana in, and you and Jeff would sit around and smoke marijuana over there in the police station, And he says, yeah, that's what we did. And which maybe they did. It might have been true. And but anyways, I taped it. But during the trial, I had him on the stand, or I didn't. I was cross-examining him. Been nice, I was trying to make out that he didn't have all of his oars in the water, and I just offhandedly, said to him, I suppose you'd even smoke marijuana over in the jail with Jeff, right? And, oh yeah. And but Jeff, as I said, I think that was a 12-count indictment, and that he was charged with at that time. And we concluded, and Jeff had testified, and he made a very good, witness. He told about, went through his history growing up here in Jamestown and being involved in being a veteran and being in Vietnam. And Jeff told about how he was wounded and had a disability, and so that we closed on Friday with the jury, and we were off on Monday because of motions. And I get a call from John Ward, who was a DA at that time. John says, you're not going to believe this, but we checked Jeff's service record, and Jeff wasn't in Vietnam. He spent his time in Germany, and he wasn't wounded. And he says, we'll make a deal. If you resign, we'll let him keep his pension, But we're flying in all these people from St. Louis. They're going to testify about his records. And no, why would he lie about something like that, Yeah. And so I got a hold of Jeff and asked him about it. And Jeff just stood there and sat there and looked at me with a blank stare and never admitted one way or another whether he did it or whether it was true or not. And so then I get a call from Judge Adams, and he's ranting and raving on the phone, to me about, Paul, in essence, if you have any brains, you'll get him up here and we'll plead and you keep his retirement, So I said, well, I don't know if they're going to, they're not going to be able to, they're going to be bringing in these people from St. Louis, but I'm going to object to that because I don't think you can be impeaching on a collateral matter. Mm-hmm. It's totally a collateral matter. What are we going to do? Have a little mini hearing on everything in his service record? I don't care. I'm letting it in. And so we went back up there the next day, and we were in his chambers, and everybody was kind of yelling at each other. Kind of got out of hand a little bit. And I said, well, you go do whatever you want to do. I'm going to put my objections on the record, and if you want to let it in, Judge, you let it in. You do your job, and I'll do mine. Well, we went back in, and in the meantime, I got in a hold of Tom Shagla, who handled he was working for Lundin at that time, and Tom handled all the veterans records. Right. And Tom said that there were always a lot of errors and so forth in the records. And so I asked him, I probably had to subpoena him to come up to testify. So I had him up there just as my back pocket. And then so just before we went into the courtroom, he said to me, he says, I'm just going to let him ask one question about if the military records, his records reflected that he was in Vietnam. So they asked the one question, and then I put Shagla on, and he said that there were always errors in the records. And at the end of the day, Judge Adams did the right thing. He didn't let him, I'm sure Judge Ward, or, John at that time didn't think it was the correct thing. But the jury acquitted him, and rightfully or wrongfully, that's...
Wow, high drama.
Yeah. We had, if you want to stay on the criminal stuff.
Sure, this is great. Now, just for the record, were you there as a private attorney representing a criminal defendant? You weren't public defenders?
No, I never held any of those. I was always a private. Okay. Right. So Jeff paid me. Yeah. And it was a guy named, this was a murder case, or an attempted murder case. And it's kind of interesting because I had one of the witnesses that I had also testified in O.J. Simpson's case. Mm-hmm. And guy's name was Taylor, John Taylor. His brother was, I think, a highway superintendent up here. But he was accused of attempted murder of his aunt out on the Riverside Road, accused of trying to strangle her and then throwing her down the cellar stairs, and she had some serious head injuries, and she looked like a mess of pictures of her and so forth. And they actually, he had lived in Kentucky, and he came up here from Kentucky supposedly to see his aunt to do this. He's going to do her in for, I'm not sure why or what the actual motive, I can't remember. But the problem I had with that is that the Jamestown police, the assault occurred at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and he was coming through. He had a white Mustang with Kentucky plates on it, brand new one. And so they saw it coming through. The city cops spotted the car with the Kentucky plates, and it looked like it had just gone through a car wash coming through. So they called it in and found out that, it was registered to John Taylor, Kentucky. And so they had his car passing through the city an hour and a half or so before the assault occurred. And she testified that her nephew, Taylor, had attacked her and thrown her down the stairs and tried to kill her. And so his defense, he claims that he wasn't, that he didn't do it. And I thought, well, that's good. What the hell are we going to do? And anyways, I was looking at it was just by luck, really, and I was looking at the pictures of the blood and so forth, and I don't know if I'd been in a seminar or somebody with Herb McDonald, and who is a blood guy, one of the top blood experts in the country. And so by chance I got his number and I called him and said, I want you to look at these, photos and see what you think. I said, here, she says she's thrown down the stairs. He says that he didn't, that he didn't do it, that she's hallucinating, and he looked at him, and I brought him in to testify, and he said that the injury could not have occurred the way the DAs had shown it out to be, that he didn't, the blood splatter, and if she had gone down and hit the cement, it would have gone over and it would just rolled out, and it was more, consistent with, falling down and so forth. And how we were in the midst of trial, Neil Robinson was prosecuting the case. Mm-hmm. Neil said that he had just gotten cell phone records, and they showed that the calls from the Jamestown Mall and different calls on the way back to Kentucky from his phone. And he wanted me to stipulate, because he didn't have the people there to testify. Of course, I wouldn't stipulate anything. And so they never got in. And all the information about the car going through the city, the 9/11 reports and the tapes, that all came in. But at the end of the day, for God knows, it's one of the few cases that I'm really kind of astounded as to how in the hell they ever acquitted him, but they did acquit him. Found him not guilty. I had another murder case with this wasn't murder, this was an attempted murder, but and Taylor, I'll say one thing about Taylor, and then he didn't pay his bill. He screwed me out of about $15,000. But that's beside the point. But it was Pete Buchanan. I don't know if you, and that it was a case that ended up going to the Court of Appeals also, but that was a murder case in Dunkirk. And Herb also, I brought Herb in to testify, McDonald, on that case for me. And I don't know if I said, Herb McDonald testified in the O.J. Simpson case. He wasn't famous when I was using him, but he's the one that testified as to the blood on the sock.
Okay, yeah.
Okay? And with Buchanan, everybody, he was a big guy, and people thought that he would try to escape, so and he made me nervous too, really. So they wanted to put a belt around him so that they could shock him if he got out of hand, and Pete didn't want that belt on, and personally, I thought it was probably a good idea, but I did raise the objections to that belt being on a number of times with Judge Ward, and we got it all on the record, and he denied the motions and left the stunt or the belt on. But believe it or not, that went up on appeal, and the Court of Appeals gave him a new trial because they said that interfered with his effective assistance to counsel, having that belt on. It was kind of I thought it was not a particularly good decision for Pete, because he came back and he was sentenced to time served or something, and he got out. You know, and you know, so that was that. With Jeff Thompson, you were asking about money and so forth. That was some of those cases. His father was having trouble with his feet, and he was a diabetic, and he was being treated by a local doctor. I don't know if he was. It doesn't make any difference who the doctor was, I guess, but he kept complaining about his toes and his feet. He had diabetes, and they kept telling him he had rich man's disease, gout. And so by the time that they got around to treating him, he had gangrene, and he lost his leg. So that was one of my first malpractice cases. And you know, as Dan Roach was on the other side of it. I don't know if you knew Dan, but a very good lawyer too. And we were able to settle that case, which helped pay Jeffries legal fees, you know, going forward. In fact, one of the, I think, Baker might have been the, you remember Baker?
Yeah.
Might have been the judge in that case. Frank Baker, right. Frank was a very good plaintiff's judge, you know, so he was a good guy to have as if you were a plaintiff's attorney in a, you know, in a malpractice case. It was a products, you know, liability case that actually nobody really wanted, and I felt good about that case. Just because, but it was against Cummins Engine, and it involved a young girl who was operating a lathe at Cummins, and she had it was cold out in the plant on the floor, and she had a shirt on over a flannel shirt, you know, with tails, and she had to lean into the lathe. They had guards and everything, but she had to lean into it to work it because of her height. And when she leaned in, her shirt got caught and pulled her in and took off her arm. And she actually stayed conscious and everything, how they took the lathe apart and got it out, but she lost her arm, her entire arm. And so, as I said, the only reason I got the case is because nobody wanted it. Everybody thought it was a piece of junk and couldn't, you know, and so I looked at it and I thought, God, you know, one, it was a German manufacturer for the lathe, and how are we going to get jurisdiction, you know, over there? And but everything kind of fell into place on that. As I recall, when I sent, we still at that time when at CPR we had acknowledgments for service, where you could acknowledge service. So I did the summons and complaint, and I took the I can't recall all the, you know, the items in connection with it, but in essence it was the fact that the guarding of the machine was such that they didn't take into consideration it was designed for a man to be operating, not for a woman, and women are shorter, and the guard didn't protect a woman that was, you know, 5'4" from being injured or getting her clothing caught. And we proceeded, we took the depositions and so forth from the engineers and stuff from Germany, and in essence I I got some good concessions and stuff out of them, and we were successful in that case, and we got her a decent amount of, money. Then it was all because of the fact that at that point, they didn't design machines and lathes for women to operate, really, and that wasn't a consideration. And so we got it was Marilyn Weaver, and that it worked out. I was really happy about that because she was such a a nice person, and I couldn't believe the courage that she had actually, and she never passed out or anything, and it was a horrific injury, really.
Yeah.
And so that was a good. And I've always enjoyed really taking money from insurance companies and banks. I don't know what it is, but I think that's one of the biggest joys of a lawyer, is taking money from an insurance company and a bank and giving it to other people. And at least for me, I've always, gotten satisfaction out of that. I had I was going against, I had another malpractice action against, involved the town of Carroll's water system, really. And they had designed a system for taking out the calcium and stuff in the water, but they screwed it up. And so we sued the engineers, and Travelers Insurance Company was on the other side of it. And they just took a cavalier attitude, like, just screw you. We're not, the case isn't, you're not going to go anywhere with this case, and you're never going to be able to show that we were negligence and at all. And they had a $1 million policy, and I had offered to settle the case for half a million eventually, and we had a jury trial and so forth in connection with it. And Travelers, as I said, you couldn't get the adjusters to deal with it. They were just cavalier and about it. And we got a verdict of $1.5 million. So that was I said that was I just felt good about sticking Travelers for $1 million, over what they could have settled that case for.
Yeah.
If they would have, just been really, I think, consider and used a little common sense. But sometimes those cases, they get, they'll set their limits on it and what they think it's worth, and it's very difficult to get things changed. But that was a good thing for the taxpayers, for the town of Carroll.
Sure.
And so that was, that worked out, good. I've had so many interesting, because I've had, just one of those kind of where now you do certain things. So if you're more or less, if you get into an area, you stay in the area, and you're afraid to go try a case, or where when I started, all these guys like Burgett and Slater, and we did everything. I mean, I tried numerous DWIs, and I would negligence cases, or a criminal case, or handled real estate, did estates, so it didn't. It didn't really bother me, where, if you were right out of law school today, I mean, you probably wouldn't even think of doing it, because you'd be afraid to, to do it. Not that I wasn't afraid, or, or really nervous about some of the things, but, we all, like I said, it was a different attitude too with lawyers. You could, if you had a problem, you could talk to somebody about it, and So it wasn't like you were, totally in the dark. In fact, Adams, when I was trying cases, when he was on the bench, he used to actually, during the break, come down off the bench and come over to me and say, "Paul, why did you ask that question? It's a stupid question. You're going to, you're going down the wrong path on this one, And so that always made me really feel really good, right during the trial to have him make any comments, but we got along fine. I first met Leetown when I was a kid, and we had a grocery store down the street from us. A guy named Poot Morris operated the store, and he was a avid Cleveland Indians fan, and I was a Yankee fan, and we used to go over there and argue baseball all the time. I was, as I said, a young kid, and he owned the store. Well, right across the street from him, there was a woman, and they had a dog, and it was a German Shepherd, and the dog had one of the neighborhood kids on the ground right out in front of the store, and was biting him, and Poot ran out with a fire extinguisher and whacked the dog, and the woman next door was Betty Kay. She was a big woman, about 6'2", and she came storming over into the store and got in a confrontation with Morse, and he shoving match, and he shoved her, and she went through the window of the store, and they arrested him for assault, and Lee represented him, and I remember sitting up in the trial. I went up to, I don't know how old I was, but Lee asked him about how he, what he did with the with Betty Kay, how he defended himself, and he said, he shoved her, and he said, "What, did you throw her out just like a bag of feed?" Poot says, "Just like a bag of feed." I threw her right through the window. They acquitted her anyways. They acquitted him. Yeah. In those 2 days, going back to when I was in the restaurant back in the 60s, and during the lunch hour, how different things are from today. At that time, Ed O'Connor was a county court judge. Hollenbeck was on the family court. Bill Young was the clerk. Bob Sullivan was the DA. And they would all come down for lunch, and they would sit at the bar and have, martinis and Manhattans. Ed O'Connor drank Manhattan. I can still remember what they drank. Hollenbeck had a vodka martini, and Bill Young Manhattans. But they would drink 2 or 3 martinis every day before they went back. And it used to really upset my dad. It didn't upset me too much, but he would come through there, and he'd always complain about how he'd had $100,000 worth of county employees sitting at the bar during their lunchtime, and how he was trying to make a living to pay their salaries. But, but that's the way things were, where you wouldn't, that wouldn't happen today at all.
Well, just out of curiosity, we're gonna go back a little bit. Was your dad, was that restaurant business, when you drive 394, you see Webb's Bowling, Webb's Candies, Webb's Captain's Table, all that. Was that something your dad always thought he'd want to get into?
I don't think so, really. I think it was just, it just happened after the war. After he graduated from high school, he graduated in 41. He actually He worked with John Yackham on the
No kidding.
Thruway, right? Because he knew John John had recruited him to play baseball, and he was his manager. And I'm not sure what John was doing, but anyways, he was buddies with Yackham, and they were stayed friends for lifelong friends. But anyways, he bought the what was a coffee shop or fountainette. Was the building right on the, where the hardware store is in Mayville? It's right across the street, corner on Ash Street and Main Street. I'm not sure what's in there now, our thing. And we lived up, when I was born, I lived upstairs in that apartment building. And then he enlisted, and my mother ran the coffee shop during the time he was in the service. And then after after the war, he came back and he got into the candy business. It was kind of funny with, he was with Patton in the Third Army, but some of the letters and stuff that I have from him back to my mother, he was even talking about coming back and competing with Buster Mills who owned the sweet shop up during that period. But he started making candy. Actually, it was in a barn in back of right there in town, but it was on a side street, and got lucky with making larger lollipops, which we gave him a infusion of money, and then we had a store over in Dunkirk. In addition to the candy store, he always stayed in the candy business there, at that time, Van Miller was going to Dunkirk High School. He would come in. I was just a little kid. They'd take me over there, and the police would come in. They'd put handcuffs on me. We had pillars in the store, and they'd put handcuffs on me and keep me chained to the pillar, which I thought was a big deal. And Dunkirk Ice Cream was just starting out in the garage over there, Billy Wells. Yeah, and so it just kind of. In around 1959, we bought they had it was called a Morning Beer. It was just like a shack ice cream store right where we are now, but it was just a white wood structure, and there was a barn there and a house, and we bought that, and in fact, that's where I met my wife and I grew up together. We went to school together, but then we started working together when we were teenagers for my dad in the morning bit. And he worked the hell out of us. That's another reason I went to law school.
Yeah, my own story. Yeah.
But so then from there, first thing we built was the bowling alley, which was an 8-lane bowling alley. And then we moved the candy plant from up in the village down to where it is right now, and had a candy store and a manufacturing plant, and then we built the restaurant in '66 onto the bowling alley, and then we built the 26-unit hotel in '68 or so, and then we built on the other 26 units onto that, and the golf course, and so that's where it wasn't anything. It was, there was never any plan. Most of the plan was to survive for the next, to pay our bills to get to the next point. So I don't, so that's.
Well, you're right. It's iconic now. I mean, you can be so justly proud. The Webb's I'm the beneficiary of the non-pearl chocolates here for everybody listening to this years from now. I got to ask the question before if I launch away. We did a CLE at the Robert Jackson Center. It was on Attica. During the course, we talked about what occurred at Attica. You came up afterwards and blew in my ear that you, in fact, had a little piece of that puzzle while probably, I think, in law school.
Right.
Tell that story, because we didn't capture it on film.
Well, it was, I had stayed at Syracuse. It was my senior year. And because of, I didn't go home for Christmas because we had to get out the, Syracuse would put out a New York law survey, and they still do, and so we were behind on that. So I was working on that, and somebody called from the McKay Commission and asked if there was anybody would want to come down and help interview prisoners in Attica. And I said, sure. Can't spend much time down there, but so I went down, and I think I was there, maybe 5-6 days, and my only involvement was that they would give us an interview schedule. I had like a cell in the prison, and we would interview different prisoners who would indicate what they saw. If they saw somebody that was shot, describe how they were shot and where they were shot, and we tried to diagram it, put it on a plat of the yard as to where they were. And I think they tried to take those statements and match them up with the injuries and so forth, at a later point. But it was the first time I was inside a major, prison like that. I was kind of taken back by how, large and, cold, just a, massive facility. Mm-hmm. And then hearing the stories from them as to, what took place and how they survived out in the yard, and how, they set up their own government, and the different, how the prison was taken, and, the whole, each had their own individual stories and their own individual grievances and so forth. I think at that time too, I was kind of taken back by really how young a lot of them were, and everybody that I interviewed was very polite and nice, and and they seemed like ordinary human, beings. You wonder, Jesus, how'd you get yourself in such a mess? They all had, a lot of them had families, and I said it was a learning, definitely a learning experience. I'm glad I went down and took part of it. So I can say I was part of the McKay Commission, and was in there right afterwards, and
did you have impressions beyond that? Did you kind of walk away after 5 days, go back to your, law review work that you had to do at Syracuse, talk to other folks who were part of that, and kind of, do you remember your reaction to all that?
Well, yeah, it was so much force and so many, it's really the brutality and stuff that was used when they took over, and it certainly made an impression on you as to whether they approached it the right way. You can always second guess on things. It was whether Rockefeller made the right decisions to go in the way he did, and the troopers that were there, and a lot of those police officers too. They were all young, young guys, didn't have the real experience to deal with a situation like that, and as a result, I think there were, there's a lot of atrocities and so forth, that needless killings and people that were, there's no question that people were shot that didn't need to be shot, and ultimately took a long time, but the courts came to their aid, and you know, I think it was Tedesco's, it was the federal judge that handled the cases right straight through, I think. And in fact, I still had a case with him. You know, he's in his 90s, and I was surprised he's still on the bench. But he handled a cell tower case that I was involved with. But yeah, it was a. You know, it was just a rough situation, and we just really weren't equipped to deal with it at that time. And you know, and probably the governor dealt with it the best he could. I mean, you couldn't have it continue on the way it continued on, and I don't know. It was. There was absolutely no question in my mind that people weren't, you know, they didn't go in there to read them their Miranda rights and treat them in a nice way. It was a tough situation. You know, I guess one of the things that too amazed me is the way the prisoners conducted things in the yard, and the way they had their own little groups and their own lingo, and you know, they just set up their own government, and oh, I can't think what the heck. There was one guy that they kept going around piping other prisoners at night. You know, he had a piping club, and they cut the guy's head off, and they found his head with his football helmet on in the latrine. You know, and but as I said. You know, what can you say?
That was a wonderful CLE that Heather Thompson
Yes.
came in, who wrote the book, and with Lee Coppola and the FBI guys. You know, it was fascinating, the whole event, and so I'm delighted you came up and shared that. Before we let you go, Paul, I know I'm digging into all your billable time here. The firm itself, it started off, it was Erickson and Webb, Erickson and Erickson, then Erickson and Reed. And then Erickson, Dick left, and then it became Erickson and Webb. So
Right.
kind of continue on the genealogy of the firm here.
Well, then after Dick left, it was Erickson and Webb, and then Lyle came with us, Lyle Hoydu, and
Bruce came in before that, didn't he?
oh, Bruce, excuse me. Yes, Bruce came in shortly after I did. I think I started with Phil in 1972, and I was admitted in February of '73. And Bruce, I think, started with us in maybe '76, somewhere around in there, '77. And then after Bruce, Lyle came with us, and then my son. And so we were. I've been really blessed. I think that I'm one of those people that I can't. I just been extremely lucky throughout my life, really. I said I met my wife when we were teenagers and going to school. We've been married 50-some years, and had 4, great kids. I was lucky, though they say that that some of the decisions you make in life are who you marry is a very important one, and who you go into business with. And I was extremely lucky to get with Phil. He was a great teacher, and he some of the fundamentals, as you remember, back when we started here in Jamestown, real estate was a big part of anybody's practice, and so, and to be able to examine a title and do the things that you had to do in connection with it, and estate work, and being able to do a 706 tax return, and so you needed somebody to guide you in that area and show you what you should do. And Phil was, he was a very good teacher, and he kept me out of a lot of trouble, and made me a much better lawyer than I would be. I can honestly say, the successes that I've had is just because I've surrounded myself with really good people. Bruce came with us shortly after I did, and Bruce was a very talented lawyer. One of the smart guys, not like me. I mean, he was, valedictorian and went to an Ivy League school at Dartmouth and graduated top of his class. Went to Duke on a Duke Law Review with Ken Starr, and Bruce could have gone anywhere. Instead he comes back, and so it was the three of us for a long period of time, and then Lyle came, and fortunate too. And Lyle's another really bright guy. Went to an Ivy League school at Penn, graduated from Wharton, so it was good. And then fortunately my son, after he decided to, he went to Dickinson Law School too, I think with you, after he talking about Dickinson with I only remember because he was right out of the military and going to West Point. He was on the first day of class at Dickinson. You had to sign in when you went into the class, and they were kids that coming into the class, and they were late, and they were other kids that signed them in. And you can ask Paul, but that was the first time Paul had realized that in other colleges maybe things like that happened. It never happened at West Point, so he was really taken back that they would sign somebody in. It was late, but I'd had, as I said, we sold the firm. We stayed together, and unfortunately, Phil died and Bruce died an early death also. But I think it's made the practice of law very enjoyable for me. And it's always being able to go to work with people that you enjoy being with, and so that's helped. And we've we've stayed together for all these years, still together, and that's why I'm still practicing. I haven't retired. I enjoy going to work. I enjoy practicing. Fortunately, I have my good health, and I can still help people every day, and that's the nicest part about being a lawyer, that you can help people. You can draw their wills, do their estate. You have to get them divorced, help them when they're in trouble, help them. That's the story of our life, right? It's helping people, and so that's a big joy. Really.
Fabulous, Paul. You've been great walking down memory lane here. And I'm not that far behind you, so therefore those things you mentioned are
right.
Remembrances for me.
And with like I said, when I first started, two of your partners, Sherry Sherry and Bob Sharp were together when I first started, and so that was a very good choice with you when you came back and you started with them. They were a great firm. Sherry was just a perfect. A smart guy, just a perfect gentleman who would always help you with anything. Just a joy to have any transaction with. You couldn't. We really had some nice lawyers that there were, of that age. I think, the rights. We're both on the board of the abstract together, but. I wouldn't be on the board of the abstract if it hadn't been probably for Bob Wright. He called me and said that he was, wanted to get me onto the board, and Bob was also the secretary of the company at that time, and made me assistant secretary and would pick me up to take me to the abstract company meeting. So, that's, we had guys like K.T. Johnson and. You remember KT?
I do. Very well. Yeah.
And we had characters, and that were, very interesting to be around and listen to their stories. Al Olson, I don't know if you knew Al, but
Just at the end, yeah.
Huh?
Bob Booty and Al
Bob
Wilson.
Booty and Al
McKee.
Al McKee, and there were a lot of, and we did have, there was a really good camaraderie between lawyers. I think maybe it's just because I'm old, and I don't know, a lot of the younger ones, but I think our generation, it just seemed to be, it was maybe a better relationship, with them.
There's certainly not a lot of one-upsmanship. I mean, it was, in one sense, it was certainly, you're in a business, it's a competitive business, but nevertheless, you respected each other as it was a real profession.
Yes.
And they treated it as a profession rather than a business, and maybe that's changed over time where it's become more of a business than a profession.
And I think the lawyers at that time really concentrated on trying to, not that they don't now, but just for example in real estate. I mean, now we have title insurance, so if there's a problem, they just pass off, go get title insurance. Back then, we had to certify the title, so you actually worked on trying to get title problems corrected, and every lawyer really knew how to examine a title search, and I think they were a lot more particular, about doing things, and even the courts and the judges. I mean, now we have, things are thrown off to clerks, and we kind of lost the. I don't know if the individual skills of doing a lot of the bread and butter stuff that has to be done in the in the law, and that's why I'm sure you see too. I mean, you'll see title searches now where there's defects in the title that just haven't gotten corrected. They should have gotten corrected, but maybe they just went out and and insured over it. But it was, that didn't happen back then. They got things corrected,
When's the last time you heard of a quiet title action?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was sort of something you pulled out all the time.
Right.
And it was laborious, but you did it. And,
right.
That most people wouldn't even have a clue.
No. And, I was, the other day, I was involved with a situation up in Lakewood where they had cut trees on the trolley tracks up there on the right-of-way.
Yeah.
And they were concerned about dealing with, we owned the property, we were right up next to it. And I said, I don't know. I mean, if the trolley company, if they had an easement and they didn't own the fee title to it, if they owned the fee title, then it reverted back to the underlying people. But if they didn't, those people still own the underlying fee. You're gonna, you don't have the right to do it.
Yeah.
And I was looking back, Nichols versus Haynes on the reversionary for the railroad right-of-way was a case that we handled in the Court of Appeals. I don't know if you knew that, but it's a.
I did not know that part. No.
Nichols versus Haynes is a leading case on a reversion of a railroad right-of-way, and Phil argued that case, and you'll see it cited a number of times. But I don't know. The law certainly has evolved. Or I don't know, for the good or the worse. You go to family court anymore. You think back with. If you went to family court at all when you were there, but Hollenbeck was over there with Naomi. We had one family court clerk and a judge. Now you go up there and just look at the mass of people, and there weren't as, and that's the same way with. It seems like with everything. I mean, we had Autumn and Bob Lincoln.
Yeah.
But now look at the clerk's office. We don't have many more cases. Probably have less cases. you know. But what are you going to do? It's the way it is. You
Time
know.
marches on, Paul. The good thing, neither you nor I have changed. That's a good thing.
Well, gotten older.
This has been great. Thanks, Paul.
That's-
I really
huh?
appreciate it. I really appreciate this. Great.
You know. Well, they, as I said, they. I actually miss. You know, fighting with people like Dick Slater over stupid things like visitation for dogs and you know, things that don't make any sense. But people like Slater like to fight about them, and so I did too.